Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He's the host of New York's most influential political talk show. He's interviewed every major political player in the state, in the city, as well as presidents and international leaders. He's broadcast from Japan, Israel, Somalia, and the Persian Gulf. Some say he's the best political reporter working in television today, but one thing you can't call him is he's a mama's boy. He's Dominic Carter, the host of New York One's Inside City Hall, debate moderator extraordinaire, and take no prisoners interviewer. Dominic has just self-published a memoir which candidly recounts the sexual, physical, and psychological abuse in his childhood and chronicles his journey from Bronx housing projects to the upper echelons of New York journalism. Dominic, welcome.
Doug, thank you very much for having me here. Before we even get started, I just want to say one thing. I hope that CUNY students realize how fortunate they are. And here's what I mean by this. I went to grad school up at Syracuse University, right? $40,000 a year. And many of the professors, I don't want to use the term dinosaur, but they stopped being in the business years ago. And what CUNY students have in this current system are the very best in terms of professors, such as yourself. Anyone, no, wait, hold on. Anyone,
You're embarrassing me, Dominic.
No, but not just you, all the different professors. All you have to do is pick up any newspaper to see in terms of the political analysts that are commenting on politics, and you are constantly in the papers. So the students, and here's why this is important, when the students are actually in class, you are still very much in the game. And so the kids end up benefiting. And just the other day, I was up at the CUNY graduate school, the journalism school. It is remarkable. And I can't believe, my daughter is now a student up at Syracuse. Again, $43,000 a year, and I checked for a year-and-a-half program to get your master's at the CUNY Journalism School. It's about $10,000, a fourth of what it costs to go to Syracuse University.
So how much do we have to slip you for this? That was good, though. No, we appreciate it. And we're proud of it.
And you should be.
And we're proud of our students who are like you, no matter where they came from. They're New York City street kids.
I agree.
And that's one of the things about your story. The Post said that this book, quote, blows the lid off of your nightmarish childhood. The title of the book is No Mama's Boy, How I Let Go of My Past and Embraced the Future. This is heavy stuff, Dominic. It's gut-wrenching, it's harrowing, and extraordinarily personal and revealing. What led you to write this?
The bottom line, Doug, I have had tremendous success as a journalist. And for that, I'm thankful. But that's only one part of the Dominic Carter story. And I feel it's important, whether we realize it or not, you and I are role models. And I feel it's important to show young people, but not only young people, people that perhaps might be adults, people that are senior citizens. Whatever, if you have goals in life, there are going to be obstacles. And the question is, how do you get around those obstacles? And so I did this book for a number of reasons. One, there was a time in my life, Doug, when I wouldn't discuss this with anyone.
Not even your wife?
No, with anyone. And
and we'll talk about this, your therapist.
That's right. I went to therapy for about 9 months, and the therapist is just learning of this now as we speak, that I was sexually abused as a child. I was so embarrassed and sexually abused by my mother. I was so embarrassed I wouldn't share this with anyone. Wow. And so you asked, why did I do this? I decided after my mother passed away, and we had a long, bad relationship, I decided that why should other people suffer within their own minds, having this secret the way that I did. Because you feel so isolated, you feel so all alone. And I felt that, you know what, yes, you might be taking a risk putting this out there, but you're gonna help some people that are in similar situations. And so I wanna help people. I want people to understand that the issues of mental illness are for real. They are very much for real. I guarantee you, everyone watching this program right now, you can be in denial all you want to, but at least one person in your family, whether you realize it or not, is suffering from some form of mental illness. And on the issue of child abuse and sexual abuse, if someone's going through abuse, sometimes a lot of people just keep it within, and that can destroy you internally. And I'm saying, look, let's put it all on the table. I'm putting myself out there. It is what it is. Think what you want, but please get help. And I'm trying to use my story to illustrate that it's possible to survive and to make it.
At what point, what was it that finally said, I need to write this story? I need to write it. You're a journalist.
Yes, and it was a process, and it was so bad for me because the first part, the sexual abuse occurred, and my mother suffered from mental illness.
She was diagnosed as a
chronic paranoid schizophrenic. I didn't even know what that meant. And so when I was a little boy growing up, and so there are a couple of stories to the Dominic Carter story.
Yes, tell us.
And so I'm growing up in New York City. For every obstacle that a person can give me in their life, I can give you two for mine. Trust me. I met my dad twice in my life. No matter how far, Doug, I've gone in journalism, and I've gone to some great places, interviewed presidents of the United States, Nelson Mandela, been to the White House, as you said, traveled around the world, traveled around the country covering the presidential campaign in '88 and every campaign onward. But the most humbling document that I have in my life is my birth certificate. And you know, whenever I get my head gets a little too big, or I start believing the press, in which the New York Times has called me the best political reporter and also a force to be reckoned with. And you know, but
I don't think it's hyperbole, but go ahead.
Well, but you know what? But when I start believing my press a little bit too much, I sit down and I pull out my birth certificate. And do you know why that's a humbling document for me? It's humbling because when you look, something that everyone else has, when you look at your birth certificate, a simple document, it says father, mother, and the doctor that delivered the child. In my case, and if you look at the website, because it's there, I want people to see it. It says mother, it has my mother's name, the doctor that delivered me at Mount Sinai Hospital, and father, it says blank. Occupation, blank. Birthplace for father, blank. On paper, I don't have a father. And so that's how I started. Grew up on public assistance, lived in the housing projects of New York City, but I had a grandmother.
You lived in a couple of different housing projects.
In the Bronx, the Throgs Neck houses and the Patterson housing project.
And one of the things that struck me was not the absence of males, and those males who were present, not very helpful, certainly not as role models, but really an absence of males in the whole environment. And you talked about this as sort of an underclass situation. Talk a little bit about that. What it's like.
You see, and it's odd because when I'm on television discussing the situation as it relates to certain segments of life in New York City, I come from that. So I know what it's like.
It must resonate, yeah.
It does. But as a journalist, and I've been very fortunate in this aspect, I have had the ability to remain neutral and objective and cover it for what it is. So I have my personal life and then there's my professional life. But in my personal life, for example, I spent my preteen years at a building 365 East 184th Street in the Bronx. And it was a 9-story tenement, if you will. And growing up, and I kid you not, I recall maybe 3 or 4 fathers in the entire building out of this huge apartment building. Maybe, and the building was mostly predominantly African American and Latino, out of maybe 1,000 apartments, if not more.
Wow.
And in my situation, everyone had a mom.
Right.
I didn't even have that.
Wow.
I had my grandmother. So I've just told you part of the negative, but
right.
for all the negative that existed in my life, There was a grandmother, my grandmother, Anna Pearl Carter, and 2 aunts that raised me. And you see, this is why I'm here on CUNY TV right now. I have learned through my life, there's only one way to make it. I don't care what age you are. You know, I get letters sometimes from people telling me they're 55 years old and they're about to start getting their GED. And that makes me extremely happy. There's only one way I know to make it. It's not through jobs at fast food restaurants or some type of illegal activity. It's education. That's the only way that I know to make it. So from a young age.
Constantly told you.
Constantly, Doug, from when I was a little boy about this big, my aunt, who was a social worker for the city of New York, would say, boy, you're going to college. Okay. Boy, you're going to college. Boy, you're going to be somebody. You're going to college. From when I was this age. And I wasn't allowed to hang out in the street. I would cry like a baby. If you look at the website, and it's nomamasboy.com, you'll see pictures of me as a kid. And I
this is a great picture.
And that's sort of the way that I was dressed in life. I sort of looked like a nerd as a kid. Even though my family was poor, my aunt had this motto of, if you don't look like you're from the ghetto, you won't be treated like you're from the ghetto.
And then you don't have to act like you're from the ghetto.
Right. And so my clothes, and I'm sure my family couldn't afford them, but on her city salary, she would go to Bloomingdale's and Macy's and buy my clothes. And I would not look like any kid in the neighborhood, and thus that would mean that, you know, I'd have a couple of incidents where I'd get beat up.
Beat up constantly.
Constantly, because I was a nerd. But they loved me tremendously. And so I didn't know. So part one of my story is, all I knew with my grandmother was that my mother was away for some time. I didn't know what, I was literally brainwashed, but in a positive way.
Go ahead.
For all the bad that existed in my life, I was never really told that. I was told that you're great, you're going to college. This is what I was told my entire life. And so all I knew was my mom was not around, and I didn't know anything. It wasn't until I was about 11 years old when I really started resenting her for the sexual abuse that had occurred.
Right. Do you want to get into that at all?
Well, here's what I can say, and I have not discussed in any interview the actual incident. It's
don't.
No. It's right. No.
I told you it gave me goosebumps when I read
it. What I can say, and you have to understand, again, there is no tighter bond than mother and child. I'm 7 years old. Any kid does what mommy says to do.
Right.
So my mom, who was under heavy psychiatric medications, and I'm not talking about basic stuff, I'm talking about major drugs. When I was 7 years old, she was in the bed naked, and I had on my pajamas, and she told me to come over and told me to take off my pajamas. And that's all I'll say for here. But what I would also like to say is, so that was one part, and that carried me, it starts to fester inside the soul, and it doesn't go away. So I'm chugging along, and I'm going to college, and I'm making it slowly, step by step by step.
And that's another thing about it, your indomitable determination to just go forward, whether it's football, whatever it is, you're dogged. It's like your interview style. You don't quit.
and I guess that's a fair assessment. But the point is that we have to believe in ourselves. And there are going to be obstacles in life. The question is, what do you do about it? Do you, okay, for example, when I was in high school, an African American, so much is made about race these days in the city of New York. There have been a lot of people that have helped me. Some African American, many that are not African American. There have been a lot of white people that have helped me along the way. And I'm proud to say that, because people have stepped up. It's not white, black, Asian, Latino, it's people. And they stepped up to help me. But I just wanted to point out, so I carried this, and we can talk about my spirit and so on, but I carried this secret my entire life, wouldn't reveal it to anyone because I was that embarrassed.
And it clearly had behavioral manifestations in terms of what you did and how you reacted to situations.
Of course, and that's why I'm here now, because I don't want anyone else to go through that. You don't have to do it. I lived in a self-imposed exile, if you will, within my mind, as I was succeeding along in life. But
so you had to compartmentalize this.
Exactly. And it was literally just like this. This is the game that I will play with myself, but it's not a game because it's something that's very serious. When I would get down about it. So, for example, when my buddies would talk about when I was about 12 years old, you know how boys are. They talk about dating girls, and I can't wait until I date.
I was a little old. I was, but go ahead.
Well, most of us are because we're lying when we're talking to our buddies.
Well, no, okay, but we won't go there.
Okay, we won't go there.
But go ahead.
But when we had those conversations, I already had an experience in the back of my mind, and it involved my mother. And I could never share this, with my buddies. So I would literally, this is what I did for almost 20 years of my life. I would go, and I later found out this is a coping mechanism for kids that have been sexually abused. I would literally go just like this, boop. And that means it's in the back of my mind, it doesn't exist. Let it go, keep going. Chugga, 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 in the game of life. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And so, but then I received a second setback. So now my mom dies.
And this is 2001?
In 2001, January 2001. She dies at Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx.
And this is a long-strained relationship.
Yes.
Your wife and your mother-in-law try to bring you two together.
Yes, and they never understood why I absolutely refused to embrace my mother. And my mother was quite good. She was very manipulative. So she was good at showing up at family gatherings and playing the role of victim. And I would never embrace her under any circumstance. So now I know from a little boy that, why was I raised by my grandmother? What's going on here? And I decided to do what reporters do.
Right.
So now she's
dug
dead.
The story.
Right. She's dead. And I tried to act like it didn't bother me at all when she passed away, but of course it did. I went through a depression, stayed home from work for a couple of weeks. I just couldn't deal with it. I believed that if she just left the earth, that everything would disappear and I would be fine. And I was only fooling myself.
Right.
So the records start arriving. And Doug, I was so embarrassed. Because there are very few places where I can go these days where people don't recognize me.
Sure.
Or they'll ask for autographs or take pictures and so on. So I was visiting Lincoln Hospital. This is right before she died. And, people are asking for autographs, and I'm trying to help, and they're asking to take pictures as I'm going upstairs to visit my dying mother, who has tape on her eyes, and she's on all types of machines. It was the worst experience of my life. So she passed away. I reached out, and my family did not want me to do this book, and they did not want me to know the real story.
They were still protecting you.
They're still protecting me. So what they couldn't protect me from is the fact that I'm a good journalist and I know how to investigate something. So I started reaching out to mental institutions all across America. And documents start coming in from different states, mostly from Georgia and the state of New York. And Mount Sinai, what I was so embarrassed about was Mount Sinai. The people recognized me when I reached out for the documents. And a lady, bless her heart, she called me up and she said, Mr. Carter, we found some document. I could tell she was sad. We found some documents as it relates to your mother. And the file is 620 pages. So now I'm going from not knowing anything about my mother and her background to finding out that at one institution alone, there's 620 pages of her from the psychiatric ward.
Right.
So
Third-person observations.
Yes, and observations of psychiatrists, independent observations.
And some of what you read blew your mind.
Yes. I arrived at the post office with my wife, Marilyn, and it's amazing how the mind, you can forget things and it can be startled back instantly. So I get to the post office, and when I started reading the documents, I wanted to cry like a baby. And then the second thing I wanted to do was crawl under the table. But my wife was there, and so I had to, try and look manly and try and be strong. First page of the document, it says that when I was 2 years old, my mother was hospitalized, and first at Bellevue, then at Mount Sinai, emergency psych admission. Because when they found her, she was trying to choke me to death at age 2. And what startled people to call the police was that someone heard me crying. And the only thing that, I was 2 years old, and the only thing that stopped her was she was startled by my crying and other people trying to come to my rescue. The second thing it said, and this is when I started learning about paranoid schizophrenic. I honestly didn't know, as a journalist, I didn't know what exactly it was.
Right.
And it said that in the document, again on page 1, that my mother heard voices telling her to throw me out of a window at age 2. So first I'm sexually abused at age 7. And then at age 40, I start finding out the truth about my life.
So, and then there had to be other physical abuse, but one of the great things was that you forgot it.
I
didn't
forgot
remember it.
But here's the bad news.
Yeah.
It started coming back.
Go ahead.
And as I read the documents revealed how the way that she would discipline me, and I don't know if anyone is aware of this, but it is severe when you are hit with an extension cord. Now remember, a lot of people that are mentally ill, they have tremendous strength. And I guess my mom felt that I was out of control or she couldn't handle me. So she would, and I was a very light-skinned child, so she would hit me with the extension cord. And I also received records where, and also family members finally told me the truth, where she felt that I had misbehaved one day, so she beat me on my testicles, and I had to be taken to the emergency room. And also at the age of 4, when she couldn't handle me or whatever the case, she gave me up to foster care. So here, imagine now, I report today on ACS.
And
some of the
not
abuses.
cry and break down when you report the story?
Well, no, I'm able to, see, here's why, because I'm free right now.
It was
for the first time in my life.
It was a real catharsis.
I'm free, and I can talk about this now. You see, the bad part for me was holding it in the back of my mind. Mm-hmm. And so remember, throughout all of this, so I'm going along, I'm covering Mayors Giuliani, Mayors Koch, Dinkins, Giuliani, somewhat of a strained relationship with Giuliani.
Oh, we don't have enough time to this interview, but you got to come back. You've got to talk about your fights with Rudy. But
no problem. Bloomberg. So now I'm in the middle of covering the mayor's race in 2000. My mother dies, and all of this stuff is playing out as I'm covering the mayor's race. Mm-hmm. So on television, I'm Dominic Carter, I'm doing the show and so on. And I don't know why. For me, crying symbolized weakness. And it was very hard for me to do it. And I don't see myself as a weak person. But I've since learned that it's okay to cry. And so what I used to do, and this is the honest to God truth, is I would be on television, do the regular show, come home, and when my kids were asleep or my wife was asleep, go down to my office at home, cry like a baby for 3 minutes. And then I was like, you're feeling sorry for yourself. What are you doing? And then wipe away the tears, and then go back to bed and start the next day all over again.
What has been the reaction? One last question before we get to the reaction. Moving from sort of the personal to the political, but not really, is how did the system, whatever that system is, let this happen?
That's a good question. A question that many answers, I think, went to the grave with my mother, and many questions will probably go to the grave with me, unanswered. Remember, this was a different time in our country as far as when her mental illness started, the late 50s, early 60s. This was in segregated Georgia. But one has to seriously ask a question of, how was this child allowed to remain in the custody of this woman?
With all these psychological profiles in local hospitals.
And the fact of the matter is, I was allowed to stay in her custody. It was only after my grandmother had had enough and decided to go to family court. And the judge, when he ruled in family court, I was about 12 years old. He was so outraged, he didn't even give my mother any visitation rights. He said that it was solely up to me. I would visit her only if I decided to, and of course I decided not to. And so, but then, we've talked a lot about the negative, but there was also the positive. And the positive is you keep on going in life, you keep on going, chugga, 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 chugga. You keep on going, no matter what.
What has been the reaction to the book, and what do you want to come out of this?
A lot of people are shocked, surprised. They've said that it's commendable what I'm doing, but I don't see it that way. I see it almost that if I didn't do this book, that I would almost be a coward, because I've lived through this, and God has blessed me tremendously. And I don't say that lightly. And so why should another person have to go through it alone if they can see that someone has been in my same situation? And so the reaction that I've received, I can't begin to tell you how many people have said to me, and emails that I can pull out right now and show you, in which people are saying to me, the same thing happened to me. Within the last 3 days, I've been told 10 times. Now, change the scenario. Maybe it's a dad, maybe it's a female victim, maybe it's a cousin, but or whatever the case may be. But I've had a tremendous amount of people tell me that they have also been abused and that they thank me for doing this.
Wow. So you've, in a sense, become an advocate.
Well, I guess an advocate as much as a journalist, one who takes the tremendous responsibility of being objective, as much as one that takes that responsibility can be an advocate.
Yes, well, that's a little bit of an ethical dilemma, in fact, almost.
Well, it's not. It's not, because I cover everything straight. Like, for example, people will ask me, oh, well, you're an African American. Yes, I'm an African American, but I'm also I'm a journalist, and I have to be a journalist first. I'm not an advocate for any particular issue. I have to call it exactly the way it is. Period. That's what good journalists do.
Right, but this book is a book that should stimulate the types of reactions that you've already elicited, and also you've got to have to believe that there are folks out there who are acting on this, and there's at least one person and maybe dozens that have been affected by this. So I thank you for your political wisdom, but also the sort of the wisdom that's coming out of this book. And we hope to have you back. We'll talk politics next time.
I would love to come back and talk with you anytime and every time I'm invited, Doug.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.